Looks like Joshua Heel is taking a page out of Pee Wee Herman's playbook. Only instead of getting kicked out of a Sarasota Spank Bank Theater, the disgraced former Abington School Resource Officer, he's been kicked out and banned from returning to law enforcement forever. This and more in today's video. Kinda looks like him. Hello, 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 and welcome back, roommates. We're not medical professionals, we're not law enforcement, we're just people who have opinions about all things going on in the true crime community, including guy who looks like he's trying to rebrand as a Disney Channel dad, Joshua Heel, who has been prohibited from returning to law enforcement ever again. So this news comes after the former Abington School Resource Officer and confidant of Sandra Birchmore reached an agreement with the state's law enforcement oversight agency, aka Post, to never again apply for certification in the great state of Massachusetts after his license had recently expired back in July. So in other words, instead of going through more and more hearings, Heel and his attorney decided to strike up a deal with Post called a disposition agreement, where not only is he unable to apply to be a police officer in the state of Massachusetts anymore, but he also can't work for the sheriff's department, any public safety office, or any other police agency. He also gave up his right to appeal, challenge, or fight this decision anytime in the future because his certification has already expired. And all of that, his name, his status of certification, as well as his history, is all going to be blasted on the commission's website, as well as in databases. So everyone can see that he is no longer certified to be a peace officer. And for some reason, if he can't stick to this agreement, it then becomes void. And the commission can hit him with even harder discipline, including putting him on the National Decertification Index, which is a fancy term for a list of all the banned cops in the US. So who is the fancy feast freak behind the dog? Joshua W. Heel, 45 now, met Sandra Birchmore in 2019 while he worked for Stoughton as an animal control officer. Heel became an Abington police officer a year later in 2020 and the school resource officer the following year. So didn't really last that long. If only animals could talk. Probably would have had a Me Too hashtag before Harvey Weinstein. So after Sandra's unaliving, Stoughton police launched an internal affairs investigation where they examined her interactions with all of the local officers, including Heel. The internal investigators accused Heel of not being truthful when they asked him about a intimate encounter with her, according to Abington police record. But at a subsequent interview later in 2022, Heel suddenly acknowledged having a single intimate encounter with Sandra Birchmore, but insisted it was totally consensual and never happened again, right? It only happened one time. So if I'm not mistaken, this is referring to when he allegedly extorted Sandra into giving him some unsolicited throat karaoke in exchange for one of the cats that she had at the time of her unaliving in his office while he was married. Now, to be clear, Sandra was of age, but still doesn't make it any better. You're still taking advantage of a highly vulnerable young woman who spent her entire growth into womanhood and discovering her sexuality by being groomed by men significantly older than her. So this is again a clip from the Case podcast, season 2. I believe this is episode 5 or 6. I will link it in my show notes below.
Josh Heel traded a cat. Now remember, he's the animal control officer in Stoughton. He traded a cat in exchange for oral sex with Sandra Birchmore. We know that. That's just a fact. That's what happened. That's why they did the DNA testing on the couch. That's why they did the adoption records. There, I guess, are none. we know nothing about the adoption records. Like nothing came out of that as far as we know.
Yeah, he returned all the paperwork that he received, that's Holmes, back to the animal control office.
With nothing.
Yeah, so he created, so let's say during his day-to-day, he finds a stray cat, which I don't even know if they take in a stray cat.
Heel?
This is Heel?
Yeah.
Forget being a cop, this guy shouldn't be allowed within 50 feet of a litter box. An internal investigator hired by Abington found Heel's conduct during Stoughton's administrative probe was unbecoming of an officer, records show. There was sufficient credible evidence that Heel was not truthful, fully cooperative, and or forthcoming during the Stoughton Police Administrative Investigation, Scott C. Allen, Abington's investigator, wrote in a 2023 report. The Post Commission is seeking to suspend or revoke Heel's law enforcement certification. So again, that's where we are today, except instead of it being revoked before they could get the chance to revoke and decertify him, he decertified himself. In a statement, he said the allegations against Heel contradict the findings of a Norfolk Superior Court judge, well that's reliable, who last year dismissed civil claims against him in a wrongful death lawsuit brought by Birchmore's estate, which I have to wonder again, he was likely named him because of his connection to the Farwell twins. In the civil case, Superior Court Judge Brian A. Davis wrote Heel's only alleged misdeed was having consensual, intimate encounters with Sandra Birchmore on a single occasion when she was an adult. Well, from what I guess evidence was presented, but there are some other things and allegations that have been made about Mr. Heel that we'll get into in just a bit. Heel resigned from the Abington Police Department in 2023, so after only a year of being the school resource officer. His state law enforcement certification is set to expire on July 1st, which it did. So this was published back in June of this year, right? So a lot has unfolded, a lot of it behind closed doors in these hearings that just typically aren't made available public. But some of his hearings where he did not show, as far as I know, face in any of those hearings, but his attorney did for him. So apparently Sandra frequently shared deeply personal information with Joshua, who described himself to Stoughton Police internal investigators as more of a therapist than a friend, right? I'm just a listening ear, somebody she can just talk to, right? I'm a good guy. In court records, Heel said Birchmore told him about having sex with Farwell when she was a minor, which is not having sex, that's just getting SA'd and R'd by an adult, as well as about other encounters she had as an adult with Farfilth's twin brother, William, who is also a Stoughton police officer, because they all just like playing ring around the posy and pass around, right? Along with Robert Devine, who we went over in one of my previous videos, so I will link that in my show notes below as well. And even if what he's saying is true, which I highly doubt, because I think if you're somebody who surrounds yourself with deprived, disgusting human beings like that, what's the saying? Birds of a feather flock together. Like, I highly doubt what you're saying is true, and that was not the first time in my opinion, but let's say it was true. You still had the knowledge that your buddy, Matt Farfilth, had been essaying her since she was a kid. And as somebody who works with kids, or worked at this time, worked with kids, and was an officer, and had a responsibility to, I don't know, do the right thing, you would think he'd have the wherewithal to report that and say, look, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what she's telling me. Maybe it should get looked into. But I digress. So this bit I didn't know, but it makes sense considering how close they apparently were. So in October of 2020, Heel told Sandra, for whatever reason, because somebody who acts as a therapist and a mentor towards a person who's younger than them would totally tell them something like this. That Matthew Farwell, who in her brain is her boyfriend, and his wife were expecting their third child early the following year, according to a filing in the wrongful death lawsuit. And again, whether that's true or not, meaning Matthew Farwell and his wife expecting, which I believe it was, why would you tell her that? Obviously, to get a reaction out of her. Like two friends talking shiz. What was the purpose of you telling her that information? Are you like the town crier for all of your buddies' wives' reproductive calendars? And just when you think this story can't get any more disgusting than a gas station taquito at 3 a.m., we find out this. So after he resigns from Abington, public school officials contacted the police department about messages he exchanged with a female high school student on an Instagram account he created for Harlow, a police dog. Now, I don't know if it's the dog that's pictured in the image we showed before, but that poor pup. During an interview with police in September of 2023, the student, whose name was redacted from a police report, said he'll use the account to ask if he could get drinks for her and some of her friends from Mary Lou's coffee shop. Another time, he'll message the student about getting his nipples pierced and having hoop rings put in them, the report said. This man needs to come with a warning label that says, do not allow near pets, children, or stores like Claire's. The students described Heel's messages as normal because of course they would. When you're being conditioned by a predator like Heel, like Farfilth, like Deviant Divine. And told police nothing weird or unusual occurred in the exchanges, the report said. Why? Because he didn't offer you a cat? An Abington police officer sought authorization to search the Instagram account for Harlow and the student's iPhone, but Brockton District Court officials rejected the warrant application's police records show. But why? But why? Does anybody know why? I mean, it seems like it's clear as day. Or could they not prove that he was the owner of the account? I don't know. Here again is another clip from the Case podcast elaborating on this a little bit more.
What's interesting is about Heel is in December, he met, it would not, so he had an Instagram account set up. I think it was APB Harlow, correct?
APD Harlow.
D Harlow. APD Harlow, yep. Which is the name of the dog, the comfort dog. We were told that he would not turn over the Instagram account he made for the Abington police. Now, we were told by several sources, again, he was using this to communicate with teenage girls.
Yes.
On this Instagram account.
Yep.
He created it personally, but it has the police department's, handle name on it. So it's a department property, they think. But he would not turn it over.
Yep.
So, and again, we were told, a couple of things we were told. We were told, number one, Heel was pretty flagrant in telling other people in the department about Sandra and the Farwells, about his relationship sexual with Sandra, and about other young girls in Abington, correct?
Yes.
Can anybody do a welfare check on Harlow? Maybe Harlow's hanging out with Cora, I don't know. But so Ted Daniel just posted this most recent update and clarification of the, I guess, terms of agreement from this deal that Joshua struck with the Post Commission. So to clarify, his law enforcement certification status is going to publicly read expired. So it's kind of like a little loophole. You just let it run out before he could get decertified. But the agreement doesn't prohibit him from seeking employment as a police officer in another state. So it's exactly like, all these pervy teachers that we see. They get kicked out of one school in one state, but then they just move and they continue. And the cycle of ABUSE continues and continues. And who is getting the crap end of the stick? The children. The children are. This man shouldn't be allowed to be a police officer ever, anywhere, period, end of story. Even so much as a mall cop, Paul Blart. Riding around on a little Segway. None of that. He shouldn't be allowed to work anywhere near children, let alone live near children. If these allegations with the Instagram account are true, and it's a known fact that he had a history of messaging and bragging, it seems like, to his buddies about all these high school kids that he's trying to wrangle, like, he shouldn't be allowed to work around animals. It's deplorable. This isn't a solution. And it just goes to show that even though this commission was put together to discipline and to make sure to weed out the bad cops from the good cops, they're not really doing such a great job of that, in my opinion. But I want to know what you guys think in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.